Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank you for attending our today's online briefing of the ambassador. It's a great honor to open this online briefing in the presence of such a big international audience. I should particularly like to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Alexander Shulgin, Ambassador of the Russian Federation in the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and Viktor Kholstov, Head of the Center for Scientific Researches of the Ministry of Trade of the Russian Federation. I would like to say a few words about our briefing today. It will consist of two parts. The first one is the remarks of His Excellency, the Ambassador, and the second one will be devoted to the session of questions and answers. So let's start, and I would like to give the floor to His Excellency Alexander Shulgin.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. We convened this online conference, which is an official side event of the forthcoming Conference of State Parties, to discuss the so-called Navalny case, especially from the prospect of what's going on at the OPCW venue. Indeed, there are lots of things to get straight, a welfare misunderstanding to eliminate. Let me say just a few words about how it all started on August the 20th, 2020. That day, Alexei Navalny felt unwell on board the flight Tomsk-Moscow. Pilots did not waste their time. The plane made an emergency landing in Omsk. In the airport, there was already an ambulance. He was administered first aid and transported to the hospital for treatment. Upon the request of Alexei Navalny's next of kin, President Putin personally stepped in to allow Navalny's speediest sanitary evacuation. Alexei Navalny was taken abroad despite being on recognizance not to leave due to his known troubles with the justice of his country. Therefore, there should be no doubt whatsoever about the goodwill of the Russian authorities in terms of providing Mr. Navalny with the best possible care. On top of that, the Russian medical crew handed over to the German colleagues necessary documents about how they rescued the patient and stabilized his condition with the purpose of airborne transportation. However, the ensuing reaction of Western capitals turned out to be tough and vehement. No sooner was Alexei Navalny taken in the charity hospital than the traces of some kind of inhibitor of choline esterase were discovered in his biosamples. 2 days on, German military medics made an important adjustment. They reached conclusion about Mr. Navalny's exposure to a military-grade nervous agent belonging to the family of the so-called Novichky. Just to reiterate, this result was achieved in a few days only. Why they got it so quickly is perfectly understandable. Indeed, in violation to the Chemical Weapons Convention, many Western countries have been carrying studies from 2000 to 2020 regarding such kind of chemicals. And this became quite obvious in 2018-2019. Hence, the Russian Federation initiated and insisted upon samples and formulas of these substances being included in control list under the Chemical Weapons Convention. And this was actually, I'm referring to the conclusion made by the German military medical staff. This was actually the starting point of the anti-Russian campaign. To spare your time, I will not dwell on how things have been unfolding with the French and Swedish involvement, and finally, the notorious confirmation by the Technical Secretariat of the presence of nervous agent in the analysis of Mr. Navalny. Just to refresh your memory, I will quote that conclusion. Biomarkers of the inhibitor of cholinesterase have been discovered, presenting characteristics similar to the toxic agents from the list 1A14 and 1A15. But this chemical is not part of the OPCW annex on toxic agents. From this moment onwards, there hardly has been any session of the OPCW policymaking organs without the United States, the UK, and the others making noisy statements insisting upon the necessity for the Russian Federation to fully cooperate with the OPCW with the aim of disclosing in a credible way what happened to Mr. Navalny on the Russian territory. As they chose actually to stoke tensions around this issue, the United States and their allies attempted to raise the stakes even higher. Indeed, the UK embassy, acting on behalf of 45 concerned countries, initiated on October the 5th this year a diplomatic démarche based on Article 9, Paragraph 2 of the Chemical Weapons Convention. Basically, they urged the Russian Federation to provide them with the answers on the questions in relation to what has been made by the Russian authorities to investigate the so-called poisoning of Alexei Navalny on the Russian territory. They also called upon us to explain why we did not accept the so-called standard procedures offered by the Technical Secretariat to provide us with the technical assistance which we requested under the Article 38, Article 8, Paragraph 38E. No later than 2 days after this request, on October the 7th, we initiated our own démarche. We turned over to the Technical Secretariat our verbal note with 2 annexes, both in order to respond to the interrogations by 45 concerned countries, and also to ask the UK, France, Germany, and Sweden the same questions we have been raising, we have been asking them before, but to no avail so far. We also asked some additional questions. These can be found in open sources. Among other things, we asked why the technical assistance mission, rather formal than necessary, had been thoroughly concealed from the Russian Federation, why the formula of the toxic agent allegedly found in biosamples of Mr. Navalny kept hidden from us, what was the role of newly British citizens, Mr. Pevcher? How did it come that on the bottle of mineral water purchased by Ms. Pevcher in the sterile zone of the Tolmachevo airport, German specialists discovered traces of the toxic agent similar to the one detected in the urine and blood of Alexei Navalny? From Annex 1, it became perfectly clear what the Russian authorities had undertaken to follow up on what happened. In the course of the preliminary inquiry needed under the Russian legislation to find out evidence of crime, the Russian police, interviewed as many as 230 persons, including people who had contacted Mr. Navalny, attended his events during his trip to Siberia, passengers on board the plane when he had a stroke. More than 100 items had been taken in police custody, including the samples necessary to carry out procedures for comparison. Police officers had watched long hours of records on CCTV cameras. No less than 20 various forensic studies had been performed, whereas as many as 64 biochemical tests had been performed. Our specialists did not find any trace of organophosphorus substance in the samples of Alexei Navalny. The probable diagnosis established by medical staff in Omsk was the one of carbohydrate metabolism disturbance against the background of the possible chronic diabetes, which caused the blood sugar to drop down. Up until now, police investigators have not obtained any information whatsoever about the foul play by third persons, which would enable the police to conclude in favor of a full-fledged criminal case. However, in order to get all information available and clarify the situation in the light of statements made by German, French, Swedish toxicologists, and also the technical secretariat, pointing out to toxicants from the notorious Novichky family, Russian law enforcement agencies asked for the assistance from their Western colleagues. Hence, the Russian Prosecutor General's office forwarded as many as 8 requests for legal assistance to German authorities. Similar requests have been conveyed to appropriate authorities of France and Sweden. Using diplomatic channels, we also asked Germany to provide us with answers under Article 9, Paragraph 2 of the Chemical Weapons Convention. None of them, regrettably, has been properly answered. This explains why we had to reiterate the same questions as before to the German, French, Swedish representatives, and also the technical secretariat under Article 9, paragraph 2 of the Chemical Weapons Convention. As I said, we added some new questions. We were absolutely disappointed by the responses received on October the 18th this year, quite formal responses or the absence thereof. Frankly speaking, for us, it did not come as any surprise. We are not the only ones the German federal government is not willing to talk to. The German authorities appear to be quite evasive and non-committal as regards their own parliament, Bundestag. I'm tempted to recommend you to look into the transcript of questions asked by German deputies and responses provided by the federal government. Please look into it and judge by yourself. Judge by yourself the extent of openness to which the German government stands ready to speak with the German deputies. I suggest you pay special attention to the questions listed as number 16, 38, 57, and 61. And especially the question about the bottles of mineral water ostensibly taken from the hotel room of Mr. Navalny in Tomsk. Speaking of the bottles, I need to be a little bit specific. There was a video footage where Navalny supporters can be seen in the hotel room, collecting various items, taking bottles and packaging them. They are seen without any protective gear other than latex gloves. Likewise, people who accompanied Mr. Navalny on board a sanitary plane to Berlin were not protected whatsoever. None of them, be it Navalny supporters, Ms. Pevchik, or people who were in contact with Navalny on board the plane, has been reported as contaminated. Highly suspicious was behavior of one of Navalny's colleagues, Ms. Pevchik, who became quite recently a British subject and who is believed to have links to British special services. She was believed to be the one who transported the notorious bottles all the way to Berlin. However, as she went through pre-flight control in Tolmachevo Airport, no bottle whatsoever has been detected in her luggage on screening. But just minutes later, Ms. Pevchik popped up on CCTV footage purchasing a bottle of water from vending machine in the airport sterile zone. We can't but ask the question, may that be the very bottle where the German experts are said to have detected the traces of the toxicant similar to the one found in Mr. Navalny's analysis? What happened to the bottle? This seems to be an uneasy question for the German officials. They are not answering to their own deputies, let alone the Russian police investigators. At most, they admit somewhat reluctantly that the bottle taken out of the Navalny's room should not be considered as a key element, as it was not studied by the OPC certified laboratory. We certainly disagree. This is just the other way around. Just the other way around. Bottles of water appear to be major evidence which is likely to shed light on the dark side of this eminently weird story. We are seriously preoccupied with the role, strange role, played by the OPCW Technical Secretariat in this affair. Not only did the Technical Secretariat hide the fact of providing the Germans with technical assistance, even before the Germans themselves made an official request, but also it tried actually to mislead us regarding its whole interaction with Germany. Honestly, it looks like what could be called a mutual assistance pact between Germany and the Technical Secretariat. Indeed, we asked questions to the Technical Secretariat, for instance, about the formula of this mysterious substance believed to be the poison. They, the Technical Secretariat, they just say the owner of the technical assistant visit report is Germany. Please, you need to handle this on bilateral Russian-Germany basis. Next, we turn to Germany, only to be told this is by no means bilateral issue, and they send us just back to The Hague to the Technical Secretariat. During the 97th EC session, July this year, it was the Germans who volunteered to explain on behalf of the Technical Secretariat why the official report compiled by the Technical Secretariat about the implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention in 2020 pointed to August the 20th as the date the Technical Secretariat deployed in Germany its assistance team. By the way, let me specially emphasize, this was quite an official document, not a blueprint like some journalists may have thought. From this indication about August the 20th, it may have been logically inferred that the OPCW experts arrived in Germany simultaneously or even before Mr. Navalny had seizure on board the plane that had taken him from Tomsk to Moscow. Needless to say that this fact alone made us even more suspicious about the foul play. Surprisingly, but the Technical Secretariat did not say so much as a single word about this case. Whereas the Germans speaking on behalf of the Technical Secretariat insisted heavily on technical error, which is, let's put it this way, which is hardly comprehensible, given that such documents are usually written by the whole team of authors, are checked and cross-checked by many people before its release. Graciously taken out of trouble by the Germans, the Technical Secretariat appears now to reciprocate, dismissing our request to be given photos and videos related to the samples being taken in the charity hospitals and then split it prior to the transfer towards the certified laboratories. We are perfectly entitled to make this kind of requests. Indeed, as a member state committed to the integrity of the Chemical Weapons Convention, we needed to know whether the chain of custody, which is sacrosanct principles of the OPCW operational activities, whether this chain has been respected or not. Significantly, we are denied up until now the access to such documentation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is high time to cross the T's and dot the I's as regards the failed technical assistance visit by the Technical Secretariat to the Russian Federation. We have already repeatedly explained what happened. We have to do this again because our opponents would not listen to us, or they would distort our position. The United States-led Euro-Atlantic allies continue to blame Russia on the pretext that we did not accept the so-called standard procedures offered by the Technical Secretariat for the purpose of the technical assistance visit. Let me just tell you that the Technical Secretariat itself has, up until now, proved to be unable to clearly explain what these standard procedures are about. Again, there are some Western countries, first of all, the UK and Germany, that pretended to draw up rules for this technical assistance visit. They forbid us even to think about carrying out studies jointly, Russia and Technical Secretariat, of what was left from bias samples taken from Mr. Navalny back in Omsk. They, the UK, Germany, claim the necessity of independent action by the Technical Secretariat, meaning the Technical Secretariat experts working in the quiet of the laboratories with nobody surveilling what they are doing. Let's put it straight. By normal conditions, we could have easily accepted such argument. But unfortunately, this is not the case anymore. It would not be exaggerated to point to lesser credibility of the Technical Secretariat as compared to what we observed, say, 5 years ago. For such deplorable state of affairs, the Technical Secretariat has to blame nobody but itself. Just think about tremendous scandal that broke out over the notorious Duma report by the fact-finding team. We all know very well the outcome of the highly professional and independent efforts by the Technical Secretariat. They hired 3 so-called independent experts, purportedly experts in ballistics, only to get the conclusion, satisfactory for the US, the UK, and France, that is about the chlorine cylinders dropped from air and not brought in manually, as it was most certainly the case. In doing this, the Technical Secretariat dismissed the initial report, actually got it rewritten in order to remove any suspicion about the United States, the UK, and France carrying out unprovoked attack in April 2018 on the Syrian Arab Republic. The Technical Secretariat continued to stick to this conclusion, distorted conclusion, despite severe criticism by prominent scholars, public figures, reputable experts, including the very first OPCW Director General, Mr. Joseph Bustani. All of these people claim that the so-called independent assessment as reflected in the final Duma report are far-fetched, if not overly openly falsified. Bearing all of this in mind, we can hardly admit that the independent study of Navalny's biosamples may have been performed rigorously and objectively. We also suggested that the joint study, Russia Technical Secretariat, of remaining samples be implemented using the same equipment, technology, and methodology that have been utilized in the OPCW certified laboratories. It was absolutely fair to make such proposal, since our Western opponents tried to cast doubt over the reliability of the equipment used by the Omsk medical crew, not accurate, old-timey, and obsolete. Again, we've been told this is something that is in contradiction with the previous practice by the Technical Secretariat. There allegedly had never been such a precedent. This position, as presented by the Technical Secretariat, looks like questionable. It does not dovetail at all with quite bulimic excitement of the Technical Secretariat to bring the attribution. This is a group of identification in The Hague, to provide the Technical Secretariat with new quasi-prosecutorial functions. Even our American colleagues did not expect the Technical Secretariat moving so fast. The Americans mulled over a long-distance marathon, and it turned out to be a frenzied sprint, zealous execution of what had been decided in a very sketchy way. To sum up, the Technical Secretariat, multiplying obstacles, in fact, made it impossible for our request to be duly taken into account. In light of what I have explained, at some point in time, this demand ceased to be relevant. As a result of numerous facts, our Western partners' blunt refusal to cooperate, to respond to our request, stubborn rejection of all our comments and clarifications, alongside the biased position of the Technical Secretariat, we are unable to establish what is of the primarily importance for us. That is, when, where, and under which circumstances traces of the military-grade agents have been discovered outside the territory of the Russian Federation in the analysis of Mr. Navalny. By the way, in case if they really discover these substances, which is not part of control list, why nobody is willing to propose that this substance be added to the list of chemicals, as it was done in 2019? No explanation for such stalemate other than Western countries' above-mentioned unwillingness to share with us critically important information, and also Technical Secretariat's reluctance to cooperation. Actually, such behavior does not surprise us. In the past, we have already reckoned that what is related to the Navalny's health conditions seems to be a side issue for our colleagues. Their preference goes rather for geopolitical ambitions. Nowadays, there is no doubt left about this. I let you judge by yourself. During the 98th EC session, Executive Council session, we asked the floor so as to respond to the démarche of 45 concerned countries, made just 48 hours before. However, colleagues from the US and UK went to extreme lengths lest the Russian ambassador would be granted the floor. They tried everything: procedural aspects, absence of the Bulgarian ambassador, reluctance, waste of precious time, all kinds of pretexts to prevent me from speaking to the Executive Council. Turning to my American and British colleagues, I said, look, comrades, are you still part of the concerned countries group? Since they did not seem to belie their belonging to that group, I tried to pressure them into answering the questions. If you are really worried, why are you refusing the Russian representative to speak out in relation with your own démarche? They simply shrugged, still imperturbable, condescended just to give me a piece of advice. Throw your documents away in trash bin? No, of course not. Throw them just in the mailbox. Actually, we do know all too well how our colleagues tend to interpret documents sent by mail. Russian foreign minister used to exchange letters with his colleagues from Germany and France over the Ukrainian issue. Then came a moment when, being wary of misinterpretation and distortion, our foreign minister had to release all the correspondence in its entirety, which is now available on the Russian Foreign Ministry official website. Please look into it, and you will certainly be able to distinguish between those who are right and who are not accurate with the facts, to put it mildly, very mildly. Given all that I have said earlier, you may realize why we have this ever-growing certainty that this is all about Western countries' maneuver in The Hague in order to cover up large-scale provocation set up by foreign special services with the help of extremist elements within the Russian marginal opposition. The choice of time was far from being hazardous. It took place on the eve of major events in the domestic situation of the Russian Federation. The United States and their allies undoubtedly are willing to instrumentalize this Navalny case as a pretext for imposing new sanctions on Russia. Significantly, the United States has introduced the first set of economic and personal sanctions just a couple of days after what happened in Siberia. They are striving to get Russia pushed on the margins of the OPCW, leveling false accusations against us about allegedly hidden chemical arsenals and purportedly ongoing research and development prohibited under the convention. My American colleague used in one of his speeches here in The Hague this expression: world turned upside down. Very well said. Indeed, this is the world turned upside down, as those who still detain the chemical weapons blame those who are totally free from military chemistry. Let me emphasize again, our country has completed ahead of the planned deadline the destruction of its chemical arsenal, which has been certified by the OPCW. Russia is in full compliance with the Chemical Weapons Convention. Actually, we are custodians of the convention, trying to protect it from repeated assaults launched by the countries that are struggling to replace international law by the rules of their own. Today, the only country that doesn't complete elimination of chemical weapons, despite plenty of financial and technical resources, is precisely the United States. We can only guess what course the events will take at the Hague venue in relation to the Navalny case. I will simply say, make no mistake, every attempt to damage our country's interests will be duly rebuffed. For our part, we will continue to do our best to get responses to our interrogations for the truth finally emerge and put a logical end to this weird and troubled story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your detailed remarks. I hope the sound was pretty good from our side. And now I would like to open the second part of our virtual discussion, and we're ready to take your questions. And who will be the first? Who will be the first to ask the questions? So maybe, yeah, I can see Diplomat Magazine.
Yes, Mayilin De Lara from Diplomat Magazine. Ambassador, this is already a recurrent situation. This is not the first time of alleged use of chemical weapons by Russia. Why do you think this case, Navalny case, is resonant now?
Well, thank you for your question. To answer it, we need certainly to consider this issue from the political perspective. There are some countries, I don't need to just name them. You all know them all too well. And these countries are quite obsessed with the idea of containing Russia, pushing it back. I still remember one of the world leaders in the past, not so remote, by the way, and this world leader swore solemnly to ruin Russia. I still can see him gleefully rubbing his hands, saying, Russia is finished. Russian economy is in tatters, and the Russian Federation, what is it? It's just small regional power. So these actually turned to be wishful thinking. Russia is still there. Russia stands ready to protect its interests. But nevertheless, like I said, a group of these countries is still striving to weaken the Russian position so as to push our country on the margins of the OPCW. And therefore, my interpretation, my guess is that this weird Navalny case came as kind of windfall for this group of countries. And they are trying to get maximum political dividends. They have been striving to create a halo surrounding Navalny, and they're using this his dubious reputation to just as pretext to pile on new sanctions. Like I said, they actually did not care about the health of Mr. Navalny. Their agenda is to be considered just in the political sphere, and this explains why this situation is going on here in The Hague.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for the detailed answer, Your Excellency. And now we would like to take more questions. Who will be the next? I can see Anastasia. Yeah. Just a moment. Yeah, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Anastasia Ivanova, Russian news agency RIA Novosti. Your Excellency, I have actually two questions. My first question is about the upcoming conference of the state parties of OPCW. What questions are you going to raise during the session, and are you planning to come up with some initiatives? Thank you.
You know, the CSP Conference of State Parties, this is traditionally about the budget, about the plan of action, and we will be consider this issue. This will not be an easy discussion. Some countries, including Russia, we object against spending money on the activities of the attribution team, this group of identification, which is illegitimate in our spirit. And since this funding is hidden in the budget presented in global form, omnibus form, unfortunately, we will have to vote against. There is also a controversial issue about chemicals acting on central nervous system, and this is yet another attempt by the United States and its allies to impose their rules, in this case, kind of understanding, which is contradictory to the Chemical Weapons Convention, actually is in contravention of to the convention. Again, they are trying to use a not conventional mechanism, but rather bypass the Chemical Weapons Convention. So the session will not be an easy one, and we will see how things will play out.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. It's about Navalny case. Earlier, Russia received answers on its questions from Great Britain, Germany, France, and Sweden. And you said that their answers were empty and meaningless, and probably they hide some crucially important information about the Navalny case. Since that, has Russia tried to get some more information from these countries, extended answers maybe, and what was the result? And will you try to get concrete answers from these countries. Thank you.
Yes, like I said, we were disappointed by the responses provided by our partners, empty responses, or like I said, the lack thereof. It's in the open space. Maybe I will give you one example. We asked our British colleagues about the role of newly British subject, Her Majesty subject, Miss Pevchik, in this weird affair. And the response was the role of Ms. Pevchik in the anti-corruption activities are well documented in the press and the media. So you see, we ask one question, and the response is beside the point. Well, we have been talking with our colleagues. We did not stop our contacts. And we are plenty of goodwill, you know, we are determined to get the answers, to look for these answers. The question is whether our partners are ready to do so. For the time being, it does not look as like, I will say this, it does not look like overwhelmingly encouraging. Are they ready to cooperate or not? My guess is rather not than yes, for the time being.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question, Anastasia. Who will be the next? I can see one more hand from Vitaly. Is it you?
Yes, my name is Vitaly Chugin, and I'm a journalist for news agency TASS. And I wanted to ask if I actually have two questions, but let's start with the first one. I wanted to ask if Russia is expecting new attacks from the Western countries in the situation with Navalny at the coming conference.
Do we expect new attacks on the Russian Federation on the occasion of the Conference of State Parties? Yes, we do. We expect that there would be new assault, new attacks. We stand ready. And like I said, we will not unanswer so much as a single attack against the Russian Federation. And like I said, every attempt will be duly rebuffed.
Yeah, and the second question, yeah, Vitaly. Vitaly.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask how sure is Russia that US will destroy its chemical weapons stockpiles by the end of 2023? And if there is any leverage Russia can use if it doesn't happen?
Well, American partners used to come up with the reports about the progress made in the destruction on their arsenal at the session of the Executive Council. According to their reports, they are moving in good direction, and they say that actually they will be able to meet the deadline. Whether it will be so remains to be seen. We will see how things will play out. Let's wait and see.
Thank you very much for the question, Vitaly. And now I can see one more the raising hand from Margarita. Margarita, can you
Hi.
hear us?
Hi, yes, I hear you. I'm Margarita Velihova from Interfax News Agency, and our question is, that Russia are there any additional steps that Russia may undertake to finally get the answers from our Western partners on the Navalny case? And are we ready to do it?
Again, our position is to get the answers to appropriate, very pertinent questions we have been asking. And we do expect our partners to comply with their obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention. We still hope that they will be smart enough to respond to requests for legal assistance made by the Russian side. You know, this is about information critically important for us to complete the preliminary inquiry to find out evidence of crime. And we are first and foremost interested in establishing the truth, what had really happened. So we can only hope that this will be the one of the possible ways. But for the time being, I will refrain from prognosis. I'm unable for the time being to predict what course the events will be taking place here in The Hague.